Hi, welcome back to another Math Doc video. We're focusing in this video on word problems that have to do with calculating the distance between two numbers. In a previous video, we discussed the distance between two numbers and also absolute values. And this will focus just on the distance between two numbers and word problems that use this distance. So as a reminder, before we actually get into the word problems, I thought we should remember how we calculate the distance between two numbers. And if you recall, there are two ways. We can either count the steps between numbers, and that's effective or useful when we're looking at two whole numbers. For instance, if we're looking at the distance between the number 3 right here on the number line and the number -1. So we can count the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the distance between 3 and -1 is just 4. Another way we can do this is to subtract the small number from the large one. So we have 3 minus -1, right? And I put the -1 in parentheses, so we realize there are two negatives here. So 3 minus negative is just 3 plus 1, which is equal to 4. Let's look at another example. Let's look at the numbers -5 and -2. So again here, let's do the counting method first. We can count 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps. So that's just 3. And as you may recall, we can also go in the other direction, 1, 2, 3. We get the same result. Now, let's look at, sorry, this is -2 here. Let's look at doing this with the subtraction. So we have our larger number here is -2, right? So it's -2 minus our smaller number, which is -5, right? Again in parentheses. So that's just -2, negative, plus 5. So that's 5, take away 2, right? If we change the order, 5 minus 2 is just 3. So we get the same result regardless of whether we're using the counting method or the subtraction. The subtraction is way more useful because if we have two numbers that are very far apart, we don't really want to count the steps. For instance, if we're looking at the distance between 3 and 89, right? We don't want to start counting all those steps. We can just do distance equals 89 minus 3 is just 86. So this is a much more useful way of doing it. And also, if we're looking at the distance between numbers that are not whole, the step counting is really not helpful. For instance, if we're looking at say the distance between 0.25 and 5 and 7/8, right? That's not too helpful in terms of counting steps, but we can look at 5 and 7/8 minus 0.25. What we would do is we would convert this to one type of fraction. So for instance, here we'd have 5 and 7/8 minus a quarter. We will write a quarter as 2/8, right? We can do that. We multiply the top and the bottom by 2. And then we have just 5 and 5/8. Okay, so obviously we wouldn't be able to do this in terms of counting steps, but we can do it easily with the subtraction. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and look at one of our first word problems. So this problem looks at the distance between numbers which happen to be temperatures. So in this problem, what we're shown here on the right is a table of the high temperatures and the low temperatures in a desert, where the variation can be quite large. And you can see these are temperatures in Celsius and centigrades, and they go from being sort of in the mid-20s or mid-teens to the low, actually below zero in some cases. And what the question asks us to do is calculate the daily temperature here, uh, the daily temperature variation, and then eventually, once we have all the numbers, also the average daily high-low variation for this week. Okay, so this is 1 week, sometime in the winter, it looks like, and we're asked to calculate the change in temperature, which is basically the difference between two numbers. And we are going to use the subtraction method because we don't want to have to count these relatively large variations. So let's look at Sunday. Our high is 22 here, and our low is 5. And so the variation is 22 minus 5, right? We took the larger number and subtracted the lower one. 22 minus 5 is just 17. On Monday, we have 23 minus 2, which is 21. So this is the variation on Monday. On Tuesday, our high is 18 and our low is negative 3. So we have minus negative 3. Remember, negative negative is a positive, so we have 18 plus 3 is just 21 again. Wednesday, 18 high, and our low now is negative 5. 18 minus negative 5 is 18 plus 5, which is 23. Thursday, high is 16, minus the low, which is negative 5 again. So we have 16 plus 5, which is 21. Friday is 16 again, minus negative 3. That's our variation. So we have 16 plus 3, which is just 19. And then finally for Saturday, our high is 20. We subtract our low, which is positive 4. And so we're left with 16. So this is the list of differences or the variations between high and low on every day. Again, we were looking at the distance between these numbers. So we subtracted the small number, the low, from the high. And when our lows were negative, we remembered that minus negative is actually plus. So 2 negatives gives us a plus. Now we're also asked to look at the average here, the average daily high-low variation. How do we take an average of a list of numbers? Well, we add them all up and then we divide by the number of numbers we have. In this case, we have 7 days, so we have 7 numbers. Let's add these up. So 17 plus 21 here is 38. 38 plus 21 is 59, right? 59 plus 23 is just 82. 82 plus 21 is 103. 103 plus 19 is 122. And then finally 122 plus 16 is just 138. So that's the sum of all the variations. Now 138 divide by 7, right? Because we have 7 days here in this week, obviously. Okay, 7 goes into 1 0 times, but into 13 it goes 1 time. 1 times 7 is 7. 13 take away 7 is 6. Let's bring down our 8. How many times does 7 fit into 68? Well, 9 times, right? 9 times 7 is 63. We're left with 5. Let's add a decimal point and a 0. How many times does 7 fit into 50? 7 times. That will give 49. And 50, take away 49 is 1. But let's just stop here. Our result is 19.7. So the average variation that week is 19.7 degrees Celsius. Okay, so that is our first example, and we kind of practiced quite 7 times, I guess, how we calculate the difference or the distance between two numbers. Our second word problem is a word problem that has to do with measuring the distance between two numbers that in this case are elevation. So the previous one was temperature. This one is another physical measurement, which is in this case the elevation. And we're looking at a hiking or a climbing problem. So, and you can also be impressed with my incredible drawing skills here. So anyway, we have two hikers that start in a valley at elevation of 350 feet below sea level. So they start off right here at minus, right, 350 feet, because again, they're below sea level. And that's misspelled here. That should be sea level. The first climber climbs up the mountain to the top to an elevation of plus 540 feet, right? Because it's 540 feet above sea level. So this first climber here, who's sitting down and enjoying the view, has climbed from minus 350 feet to plus 540 feet. So what is the vertical distance this climber climbed? Well, she started off at minus 350. She climbed to 540. And what is the vertical distance here? Well, we'll take the larger number, which is plus 540, and we'll subtract the smaller number, which is minus 350, negative 350. So we have 540 minus negative 350. That equals 540 plus 350, right? Because we have two negatives, which ends up being 890 feet. So this first climber climbed a vertical distance of 890 feet. Now the second hiker climbed up 470 feet. So we see that 470 feet is less than 890 feet. So this green climber here only climbed 470 feet. And the question is, what is the vertical distance between the two climbers? Well, what we have to do, we can do two things. We can figure out how high she climbed or he climbed, and then subtract that height from our 540, which is the top of the mountain. Or we can just say, well, we know that this first one climbed up 890 feet and the second one only 470. So the difference is just 890, which is our larger number, minus 470, which is our smaller number, right? And that just equals 420 feet, right? So that is our answer. And again, this is now the distance between the vertical distance between two climbers. Now let's see how we can put this information on the picture here. Well, we said the first climber climbed 890 feet, right? So we can show that with a vertical line from the top of the mountain to the bottom here. On the other hand, the green climber climbed only 470 feet. That is the distance here between the climber and the bottom, 470 feet. And then the difference between them is just 420 feet. So this was our second and final example for calculating the distance between numbers and using this calculation for word problems. Our next video will focus on word problems that have to do with absolute value, which is related to this because absolute value is basically the distance between a number and zero. So if you have any questions, please include them in the comments. If you can, like and subscribe to my videos. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me again.